call the meeting to order for the New Ulm Economic Development Authority, Tuesday, October 9th. Item number 1 is roll call. We'll waive the roll call. We have a quorum present. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes of our October 11th, 2022 meeting.
I'll move them.
I'll second.
Is that better? Sorry about that.
Thanks,
Playing
Mike.
musical chairs today. We have a first and second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Item number 3 is EDA Director's Administrative Report for October 2022 activities.
Right. Good morning, Commissioners and President Brom. Just looking through the reports here, I don't see anything out of the ordinary to highlight for you this month. So unless there's questions on anything.
Any questions for Heather?
Seeing none, I'll make a motion to accept the Economic Development Authority administrative activities for the month of October 2022.
I'll second.
We have a first and second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Item number 4, EDA November 2022 claims list.
The only one I had a question on was, looked like it was a set amount for cleaning Broadway House. Can you talk about that just a bit?
Yeah, so we have been having trouble filling the part-time maintenance position over there. So we don't have a maintenance tech again at this time. So we have been paying someone to go in weekly to do things like vacuum the hallways, clean the public bathrooms, that sort of thing. So that's what that is. And actually, that total should be $950. I caught that after the agenda went out. And then she also cleaned an apartment that was a turnover for us.
So that's a monthly fee?
It's per time. She invoices us per time by the hour.
Okay. And is that open position a full-time position, half-time?
It's part-time, 25 to 30 hours a week, and we have tried unsuccessfully to find a
Really?
maintenance tech 3 times. At this time, we're not going to post the job again. We're just going to contract out and see how that goes. With the workforce shortage, we're just not finding quality candidates.
It's too bad.
Yeah, it is too bad.
So Heather, how often do you anticipate services being required? Is it like a monthly or twice a month or every other month?
The
or-
cleaning?
Yeah. and
I have
such?
her go in once a week to clean.
A week, okay.
And then if I have a turnover, she would go in and clean
clean
that
the
unit, and
unit.
that would be
Okay.
additional.
Gotcha.
I'll offer the motion to approve the November 8th, 2022 claims list.
Second.
For first and second, is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Item number 5, Economic Development Authority, consider the approval of a Get It Ready loan to John and Heather Bragel for the amount of $10,000.
Mr. President and Commissioners, before you have a loan for the Get It Ready program, the amount of $10,000. And normally this wouldn't come before the board for approval. This would be something we'd be able to do as staff. But because Heather does work for the city and is directly tied with the program, we do have to get board approval for the loan. Heather and her husband meet all the requirements for the loan. There were no issues and their credit was in good standing. So my recommendation would be to approve the loan in the amount of $10,000.
I thought I recognized one of the names on there, so.
So we don't have, I guess I have to bring it up. There's no rules that employees can't apply for this.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Should there be?
It's public
It's
funds.
public money.
That would be excluding, and that would be discriminating against somebody, I think.
Because it's first come, first serve. It's open because it's open to everyone. There's no income restrictions or anything on it. And she meets, Heather and her husband both meet all the criteria.
Oh, I have no
Yeah.
problem with it. I'm just talking more philosophical or large picture. What if half the board applied? I mean, it just wouldn't look real good, would it?
If you need to fix your house, you need to fix your house.
Yeah, I think the underlying reasoning behind this program was to preserve and keep our existing housing stock in good order. And we wanted to help facilitate that. And
Right.
I think their home would be
Qualified.
and fall under that criteria, just like any other home. I know there are situations when it comes to this where you can say that potentially, but Heather isn't voting on this nor have any part in making the request granted or whatever. That falls on our shoulders. And I think this is the right thing to do in this instance, is come to us so we can openly discuss and approve or deny it or whatever. So I think that these are the absolute right steps to take.
Yeah, and that was the city attorney's kind of recommendation was he didn't see any issue because the program doesn't have any caveats for city employees, but then just to put it out there that a city employee is getting the funding and approved by the board. But again, to Les's point, I mean, if that's something you want to add in the future, we can absolutely look at that. But
I look at a similar circumstance. We had the small business grant, and my daughter was starting a daycare, and just the opposite was true. That request didn't come to us because it was managed and handled by city staff, and so I had no direct involvement with it. And I see really the same situation here in terms of the beneficiary of the request is not really directly involved in the decision making.
yeah,
Transparency obviously is key.
Yeah.
And that's probably
And that's why we're here, I think,
Yep.
right now with it.
I agree.
So,
I just want to make sure we talked about it.
yep, I agree. I think it's a worthy discussion, Les.
Also say this funding was available, if we were closer to not having money available, I probably wouldn't have applied for it, but there is funding available. We are coming up on the end of the year. I could have applied for 40,000. I'm only applying for 10.
Well, and I would anticipate next year a reallocation of funding to go in there to meet what our perceived requirements or requests
Yeah.
might be for next
I
year.
think only 9,000's been used to date,
Okay.
and I think there was 120,000 available. So there's still money out there if someone else wants to apply before the end of the year.
Good. Well, maybe this is a good way to get the word out.
Yeah.
Well, I'll offer a motion to approve it if that's what we need on the table as a motion for it.
I'll second.
First and second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll then call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? That is carried. Item 5.2, receive the 2022 Comprehensive Housing Needs Analysis.
All right, so the board approved a proposal from Maxfield Research and Consulting for a comprehensive housing needs analysis, or commonly known as a housing study, at the January 2022 regular meeting. That process has been completed now, and we have representatives from Maxfield Research and Consulting with us via Zoom to present on the final draft and give an overview of their findings and recommendations, and of course, answer any questions you may have. So I will turn it over if they are on. Do we have them, Mike?
Yes, can you hear me okay, Heather?
yes.
Yes.
Matt Mullins here, Maxfield Research. Okay, well, great. I'm going to try to share my screen here, everyone, and
Good
see
morning.
if we can get, good morning, everyone. Great to be here this morning. Happy election day. Happy to have this day over. That's like, enough of the political ads. So, just curious, can you see my slides there?
Not yet. We see you.
Okay. You can see me, but you can't see my slides, huh? Okay, it says slideshow. Okay, let me go back here. All right, share screen, share. Can you see that now?
Here we
There
go.
you go.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of toss this back and forth to myself. I've got Brian Smith on here as well from Maxfield. So we're going to kind of piggyback this. I'll kind of kick it off, and then Brian will kind of dive into the more intricate details. So he did a lot of the research, so he'll be talking more about the fine details, and I'll kind of take it back again at the end and talk about the crystal ball and what we think might happen in 2023 and beyond for the housing market. So kind of kick things off here again. Maxwood Research, we're a real estate consulting firm here located in the Twin Cities. We work on a lot of both private sector and public sector work. A lot of public sector work, such as what we're doing right now with the city of New Ulm, housing studies, highest and best use, et cetera. As well as we do a lot of work too with the private sector, developers, builders, investors, et cetera, and more site-specific projects. Let's say someone wanted to build a project in New Ulm, they had a piece of property, we work with them and kind of help, assemble a plan, assemble the right use, what's the right incomes, unit mix, et cetera. So we do a lot of public sector work as well. So just kind of give a highlight here of where we're at. Heather mentioned the board approving this back in early in the year, and then we really got started out of probably in the spring months, March, April, and the real estate market has changed a lot over the past even month to month, 6 months, as we've seen the Federal Reserve really tighten the economy up with the rising interest rates. So the data we collected was really, March, April-ish, all the way through about September. And then we issued the report in October in a draft format. And we're still going through some revisions. We've issued a revised report, see a few tweaks we need to make here, revisions before we go final, but just wanted to share where we're at right now. So hopefully we can wrap it up here real soon after any last minute revisions. So that's kind of the, when the data was collected and whatnot. So I want to talk about, bigger pictures. We'd look at, the previous housing studies. So it looks like the city's kind of been on this 5-year spread, so to speak, of up in housing study every 5 years or so. We did one last decade, early back in the housing boom in 2004. The community partners did a couple. Now here we are again in 2022. And I just want to stress the fact that the 2020 census came out. However, really all that's relevant to date is the population numbers. The majority of the data points have still not been released. And we don't expect that to happen until, it's looking like next year sometime, maybe mid next year, and that's probably optimistic. It's been a lot of issues with the 2020 census, through COVID, the pandemic, and then the data releases has been delayed. So a lot of the data we present is, based on local permit trends, building permit trends, where we estimated a lot of the projections based on kind of what's been happening in the local economy and building permits versus, say, straight census data. And finally, I just want to touch on, we'll talk about this more during the presentation, just the impact of COVID, the pandemic, the housing market. And right now, we're just in a real interesting transitionary time, late in 22, with the economy and inflation and what's happened with the local housing markets. Just, recently with, the mortgage rates ticking up to 7%, we've certainly seen a lot of changes in the market month to month. We really peaked in about April of 2022. And since that time, the market has been slowly normalizing. So we'll talk more about that later on. So this time, I'm going to kind of kick it back over to Brian, and he'll jump into more of the demographics and economics data. And then later on, we'll kick it back to me, and I'll talk more about the crystal ball outlook and what we can expect long term. So I'm going to stop my sharing, and then Brian's going to share his screen. And knock on wood, hopefully this go smoothly. All right, so stop my screen. Stop share. All right. All right, Brian, good luck.
All right, yeah. Here we go. Is it working?
It's working. Yep.
All right, perfect. So, gonna go through kind of just a brief overview of the study. The study is very intensive, so implore you to read the study. Lots of detailed information in there. I'm just gonna go over the fine points of it. So the market area we used was consistent with the previous studies, focusing on the area surrounding New Ulm, the 12 townships, and the 4 communities. New Ulm is the economic driver of the PMA and basically the hub of the market area. Everything is driven towards New Ulm and the surrounding area. Demographics and economics. As you can see here over the history, guys are, this is just New Ulm, not the PMA. Growing until the 80s, and then you had a decline there in the 90s, kind of stabilized, fluctuated a little bit. Till 2020, where the new census has shown need to grow, and then our projections indicate continued growth through 2030. Projected population households change. You can see New Ulm is expected to grow, but the remainder of the PMA is projected to continue to decline. It's basically been declining, as well as people moving to New Ulm and to other larger communities. But the growth is not as high as in overall Minnesota, but there's still some good moderate growth there in New Ulm. In terms of age cohorts, the aging population in New Ulm and the PMA is prevalent here as the baby boomers are the largest age group in the market area, and will continue to grow as the decade moves on. This also shows the projected age groups growing from 2022 to 2027 is 65 to 84 is showing significant growth, while most of the other age groups are declining or have minimal growth through the next 5 years. And over the bullet points, the 65 older group, you can kind of see over time, 17% of the total population in 2000, and by 2027, it's growing to 25 to a quarter of the population in New Ulm. Households, household types here, married with children and married without children are seeing the most significant growth in New Ulm, while other families, single parents, are declining. People living alone are basically stable. Roommates are also growing, but it's a small portion of the population. Incomes are strong in New Ulm and the PMA. And the highest households are the millennials with 90,000. So plenty of opportunities for to afford housing types in New Ulm. The chart also shows kind of the growth there in households. As you can see, the 65 plus is the most significant growth, while the others groups are either declining or kind of remaining a little bit stable. In terms of jobs, New Ulm is an importer of employment. As you can see, almost 6,000 people are coming into New Ulm, while only 2,500 people are leaving for employment. Manufacturing is the highest job sector, 23%. Education, right there at 22%, and the trade, transportation, and utilities. So those 3 sectors account for about 70% of the jobs in New Ulm. Average weekly annual wage, $949 a week in New Ulm, equating to about $50,000 a year. In comparison, state of Minnesota is at $1,375 and $71,500 a year. roughly 40% of the residents leave the city, while 60% come in. So there's an opportunity to attract, 60% of the people with new housing in New Ulm if they choose to move to New Ulm.
Brian, your voice keeps coming in and out.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me better now? Maybe I could just speak
Yep.
louder.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. 28% of county workers commute from 25 miles or greater. So, as with the people moving in for jobs, you might be able to attract some of those people that are commuting greater distances. Labor force and employment. This shows kind of historical view from 2008, declining and then increasing. And as you can see, the COVID pandemic had a pretty significant impact in 2021 with a pretty significant decline there in both labor force and employment numbers. This also shows kind of how COVID impacted with a significant jump in unemployment from 2019 to 2020, but decreasing back down in 2021 with similar numbers as 2019. And this is kind of a month-over-month view of unemployment right before the pandemic and then after the pandemic. So actually, unemployment figures in the state and in New Ulm and the Economic Development Region number 9 they're actually lower than prior to the pandemic. So unemployment rates are pretty low right now. Now we move on to the market for sale, rental housing, senior housing market. Housing construction, New Ulm is averaging about 38 units per year of housing units, 19 units single family per year. The multifamily had an uptick in 13 and 14 and 2017 and 2018, but relatively stable other than those kind of time frames there. The rental housing is extremely low vacancies. We interviewed 20 properties with 655 units, and the vacancy rate 1.8%. The industry standard is 5% vacancy for market equilibrium. When you focus on just market rate, there was 14 properties with 370 units, and that vacancy rate was nothing. It was 0.3%. There was only a few units available in the properties we interviewed, with an average monthly rent of $778 a month. Affordable subsidized also had low vacancies at 1.4%. There's only 6 projects. 2 of those were shallow subsidy and tax credit affordable properties, and the other 4 were subsidized where rent is based on their income at 30%. In terms of senior housing, this is kind of a chart that shows you kind of how seniors move through the housing. You start in a single family home, and then as they age, they move into a townhome apartment, and then if they need services, move into assisted living or independent living. Vacancies elevated in during the pandemic, specifically in assisted living, where currently the vacancy rate is 12.5%. There's also the highest number of units in assisted living in New Ulm. All other housing options for seniors had vacancy rates below market equilibrium. And I did not identify any independent living with light services. Everything seems to focus on the assisted living portion of the market. In terms of housing cost burden for renters and owners, 37% of all renters in the market in New Ulm are cost burden, and 55% of those renters with incomes under 35 are thousand are cost burden, while owners, only 12% of owners are cost burden, and 32% with incomes under 50,000 are cost burden. And you can see this is much lower than for the economic development region and the state of Minnesota. You guys have several developments in the pipeline. The Hope Housing Foundation, which would add 118 affordable units. The Market Flat Small redevelopment, which has a potential for 90 units. The Lakeside Village development, which is proposed to have 30 to 50 units of mixed income units. At this time, we didn't know what you guys didn't know what if they were market rate or affordable, how many units each type, it's roughly 30 to 50 units. The pandemic has caused the for sale market to jump in pricing. The sales transactions have increased from earlier in the decade after the recession last decade. Really strong housing market the last 5 years. Extremely low inventory with only less than 20 homes on the market at a time, typically. Slow and steady increasing resale price until 2022, which has jumped significantly. The median sales price is at about 5% increase annually since 2013, but in 2022 it jumped 22% over 2021. This chart shows you kind of the shift over the years of the housing prices, for sale housing prices in New Ulm. As you can see, in 2013, roughly 90% of the homes were for sale under $200,000, and as you get into 2022, you only have 50% homes price at $200,000 or below. So you're seeing a significant increase in housing values. Active listings, like I said, it's a very low inventory, only 19 at the time in September when I collected the data were listed. An average price of $293,000, a median of $290,000. 17 of the 19 were in New Ulm, and only 2 were listed outside New Ulm. The median price, the average price equates to a per square foot of $97 per square foot, when new construction commands a premium of $150 per square foot. So you're getting a good value compared to new construction on existing homes. This chart shows you the active listings by price. Most of the most of the homes are listed between $150,000 and $199,000. You had a good mix across the board, except for the very low under 150. There's only a few homes available. Lot inventory, there's plenty of lots available in New Ulm. We accounted for with the data you provided, and then also additional data on the assessor's database. We found a supply of 181 lots. 163 of those lots were platted since 2017. And of those 160 lots, 67 of the lots are currently vacant, available to develop on. There's also 52 lots available for multifamily type development, townhomes, twin homes, row homes. The new construction market in New Ulm is typically build to suit. There's really no large production builders in the area. Builders rarely construct spec homes. They may build a home and then just try to sell it, but they're not building a spec home and then sitting on it because they just can't. They can't afford to sit on those costs. Because they only build about 1 or 2 homes a year. The new product typically targets move-up buyers or executive buyers. Entry-level market for new construction is really hard to construct with all the construction costs and infrastructure fees. This chart shows where the single-family lots by subdivision, which ones are available, where the vacant lots are. For demand and recommendations, our demand methodology includes household growth and tenure, turnover of households, income qualified households, and then demand by product and preference. The assumptions for the methodology are household growth adjusted by local factors, building permits, the economy, etc. Senior demand estimates and applies capture rates and penetration rates are presented at point in time for cumulative. Overall, we found demand for 365 general occupancy units, non-senior units through 2030. So about 150 single-family units, 50 multifamily for-sale units, 135 market-rate apartments. Shallow subsidy rental, we had 0, and that's accounting for the 118 units for the Hope Foundation. So if those units are all developed, it brought our demand down to 0. If they weren't there, you'd have plenty of demand showing for affordable units. And then a deep subsidy rental demand for 30 units. In terms of senior, as the population grows, there's going to be plenty of demand for senior housing units with 440 units through 2027. With the majority of those available for active adult and independent seniors. Market rate active adult, you're going to have nearly 170 units split between owner and renter, 105 owner, 61 renter. Affordable active adult, 78 shallow subsidy affordable units, and only 16 deep subsidy units. And service enhanced, because there was no independent living with light services in the market at all, yet we're showing high demand of 143 units for that type of development, while there is plenty of assisted living units in New Ulm. So, and high vacancy rates, we only show demand for a small amount of 8 units, and then 29 units of memory.
Brian, you're cutting out again.
Sorry about that. In terms of for sale recommendations, 3 to 5 year lot supply is typical recommendation. We find that the current lot supply is sufficient in New Ulm in the near term for that. You have at least 5 years of lots available to absorb that 150 single family demand number. Demand is across all price points. Interviews with realtors indicate that there's demand for entry level through executive homes, but due to development costs, entry level is very difficult to develop. Also demand for 50 units, and there was plenty of lots available for multifamily development as well to absorb the demand. There was a lack of association maintained product. I couldn't find any on the currently listed, and the realtors indicated that is a very popular product, especially at cottages at Orchard Hills. Something goes on sale there, those are sold very, very quickly. And potential multifamily types with twin homes, townhomes, detached townhomes, quad homes, row homes. Plenty of available options there. Rental housing. There was a demand for all incomes. With the very low vacancy rates, there's just nothing out there for people to rent. They have to go to try to find something in Mankato or another community to rent. And employers stated, it was somewhat of an issue for people relocating to the area to find them, temporary workforce housing before they could find a home to purchase or build. Demand was for 165 units, and as we mentioned, the Hope Housing Foundation would absorb all of the affordable demand if they were to develop all 118 units. And the Market Plat Mall, we accounted for 30 of those units, but if they had developed the additional 60, that 135 number would drop another 60 units to about 75 market rate unit demand. Still plenty of demand to build additional market rate units. So we did account for some of the projects in the pipeline. But there's also the Lakeside Village, if that went forward, depending on how many units were affordable and how many units of market rate, that would absorb some of that market rate demand as well. Senior housing, significant demand through the decade as the population continues to age. Strong demand for all senior types except for assisted living, as you have plenty of demand there. And COVID-19, people are still kind of shying away from putting their loved ones in assisted living. Even though talking with the assisted living, they're seeing kind of an uptick in people coming back to the assisted living unit. Overall, plenty of demand for active adult ownership products, affordable and market rate rental in the senior product. Key takeaways from the study. You guys had modest growth last decade and continued to project into this decade. As the population ages, we're seeing households growing faster than the population. For the remainder of the PMA, the declines are projected to continue through the decade. Most of the growth is in the 65 plus older population, equaling a need for alternative living options, more senior housing as through the decade as the population ages. Empty nesters and those living alone are the highest percentage of the total population in households at 33% each. Roommate households and married are without kids are growing, or the household group that are growing the fastest. New Ulm is a strong job importer. 60% of the workers commute into the area for employment, indicating a good potential to grab some of those workers for future residents. Local employees have had some issues hiring workers due to the lack of housing options. Very, very low rental rates, older stock of rental housing units, pent-up demand due to those low vacancy rates, but there are several projects in the pipeline to help alleviate some of that pent-up demand. Senior housing, we keep stressing, is a market poised for strong growth, and new products will be needed. For sale housing market, earlier in the year was currently strong with a tight supply. Our interviews with realtors starting to see signs of softening as the interest rates and mortgage rates rise. So they're seeing more homes sitting on the market longer. Prices are starting to be dropped for certain homes that are sitting on the market, but the supply is still tight. So not resulting in an increase in supply, resulting in maybe less people putting their homes on the market. Inflation, higher mortgage rates, high construction costs are all impacting development currently. Priorities for New Ulm are to obviously promote rental housing production with these low vacancy rates and lack of product availability. Senior housing to help alleviate future needs as the senior housing base grows in the community. Need for association maintained and one level living options. The older adult and senior community gravitate towards that type of development that will open up entry-level single-family homes in New Ulm that families can move into while seniors move out into association-maintained developments. Another thing employers commented about is even a few of them said it's probably stronger than the need for housing is that daycare is a strong need for employees. There's not much options out there for them. That may also impact their ability to move to the community if they have kids and there's nowhere to provide care for them. Promote public-private partnerships to stimulate housing market growth. Update your housing action plan regularly, and continue to promote your schools, your recreation, open space, your community, your housing affordability compared to other communities, and the option of working from home. We kick it back to Matt now. He'll give you a look of the 2023 outlook and beyond.
All right. All right. Got me back here. All right. Thanks, Brian. I'm going to get my crystal ball out here and talk about what's, the forecast going forward and what we anticipate may happen in the various real estate markets. So can everyone see my screen there? Kind of switch there. Is it back up? Are we live again?
Yes.
Okay, I assume so. All right, perfect. Okay, so before we could really get into, I think, all the intricate details of 2023, I think, the elephant in the room is the economy right now. As I probe a lot of, our clients, and I probe speaking engagements, I probe audiences to get a feel for where we are in the economy. And how's everyone feeling, right? And I think there's more negatives than positives. I think that's probably safe to say. There are some bright sides of the economy today, but there's more red flags than positives right now. And the economy certainly plays a segue into the housing market, right? The economy and the housing market are interrelated, and they play a part in how they relate to each other. So, big picture, we always talk about inflation. GDP has been down 2 straight quarters. However, last week or 2 weeks ago, we found out we had positive GDP this last quarter, which is fantastic to see. But overall, the sentiment is that we're probably heading into a downturn in 2023, just given inflation and kind of what's been happening. A deceleration of job growth and wage growth, et cetera, that could lead to a blip in the economy next year, which certainly will affect the housing markets as well. But as we talk about the housing markets, I think what's been just fascinating over the past, 2.5 years now, since March 2020, has been mobility rates and this movement for affordability. I mean, certainly there's been a lot of mobility across the country, especially going to the Sunbelt markets and lower cost markets that have say better weather, different tax structures, and just lower housing costs. But we've also seen a lot of movement across the state of Minnesota as well. The state of Minnesota has been rather flat as a state. As we look at 2020 to 2022, we really haven't grown much. We've been staying at number 31 out of 50 right now in the U.S. as far as population growth. But we are seeing the mobility changes. There's certainly more mobility moving from all the Twin Cities to suburban, exurban, rural areas, and we continue to see that. So we continue to see this more desire for more space, more affordability, more outdoor spaces. There's a lot of different product types that may not have been as desirable pre-pandemic. And one thing we've certainly seen a lot of too, and we see this in New Ulm, is this desire for the non-traditional rental unit. So Brian touched on the low vacancy rates, which are super, super low in New Ulm, and we are like as low as we can get, right? But the demand is also for non-traditional rentals, such as single-family homes, rental townhomes, condos, etc. Units that have a separate entrance, more space, yards, etc. There's certainly a high demand for that product type as well. So mobility certainly plays a part here, and we do think that New Ulm has a great, it's a great community. I'm very familiar with New Ulm. I grew up Highway 15, just north of Hutch, so 45 minutes north. I, drove to New Ulm a lot. Certainly played a lot of sports in New Ulm. I've always, liked the community and thought it was a great, just a great city and community, downtown, German heritage, etc. So I think you have a lot to offer as far as, the affordability and grabbing people from outside, the area. But as we look at our crystal ball and what's happening, I think, Brian touched on it a little bit. Certainly, we're seeing the housing market normalize. We've been on this massive run that's unsustainable. I mean, we had, 20% increase roughly in pricing over this past year. That's just not sustainable. Long term, it's been like 5%, which is pretty normal. But clearly what we're seeing lately has not been sustainable. But what the Federal Reserve is doing, the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates 5 times now this year. We expect another increase in December and probably 50 basis points and early 2023. We'll see what happens, if they kick it down a notch or not, but rates are continue to increase. And every increase in rates, it decreases affordability. So put in context today, if you bought a house in January of 2022 and you bought that same house today, let's say October, November, you're paying 60 to 65% higher mortgage than you were in January. Substantial increase, right? So that is cooling the market and appreciation. However, as Brian touched on as well, we still have this really super low supply of homes in the market. So although, yes, we're seeing some price declines happen, that homes may have not sold as fast as they anticipated, pricing is holding steady right now to date. However, it's yet to be seen if what happens in the future if these rates keep going up and the supply continues to be low. What happens with supply and demand? So right now we're holding steady, but we anticipate things will continue to decline just because people can afford it, right? The biggest challenge I think we have today is what I call the rate lock-in effect, where 60% plus of existing homeowners today in the US have mortgage rates, under 4%. If you're like me, I was one of the lucky people locked under 3%. So it's like, it's hard to motivate someone to move when you have a sub 3% mortgage rate and moving up to a 7% rate. I mean, it's not logical, right? So we do think that mobility is going to certainly kick down. And there's going to be more demand for remodeling services. People stay in their existing homes, make improvements, do that kitchen, do the windows, do those HVAC improvements where they need to be, and they stay in the home longer because just these rates have really escalated quite substantially. Now, historically, these rates are still low. I mean, 7% rate is still low. If you look over the past 30 years, it's still a low rate. However, people have just been so accustomed to, the Federal Reserve keeping things so low that it's kind of a gut punch in the gut right now. So we do anticipate things to kick down in 2023. And the unfortunate thing is demand's not going away. We know demand is going to be strong. However, supply is going to be curtailed. So it's going to be interesting dynamic in this next year or so. Let's see how they diverge. The rental market, high level, we are seeing some, granted, New Ulm is probably an anomaly here because you have such low vacancy rates that are unheard of. But across the country today, the rental market kind of has cracked a little bit. We have seen kind of the peak and things have kind of started to fall as far as rent growth. And a lot of this due to supply, and a lot of this is due to the economy. Household formations drive it. And if people are maybe rooming up again, having a roommate situation or other moving back home, that could affect rental market. At the same time, we've certainly had a big hit to landlords this past year with inflation, whether it be property taxes, payroll, insurance on these bills has gone up a lot. The question who's going to absorb that cost? Will they try to pass it to the tenant or not? And the tenants are saying no, because our wages are not going up as fast as inflation or rent. So we'll see how that plays out this next year as expenses keep escalating. Excuse me, I've got a cold here. I'm fighting off. Just trying to maintain my voice. But we do see plot is starting to fall off right now due to inflation, record high construction costs, and the cost of borrowing, especially. We're working with a lot of developers today. We're starting to say, you know what? I'm going to wait a little bit, put things on hold, because we don't know what's going to happen next year. So we're starting to see that play out in the rental market as well. Other things I think that are kind of going to be a big question mark right now is how many would-be for sale buyers are on the sidelines today because they can't afford to buy a home. It puts them back into the rental market. But as you know, there's nowhere to rent a new home. So then that we have a bigger problem as well, just because it's snowball, because there's nowhere to rent. Because of being priced on the for sale market, it's nowhere to rent. So then what happens to these householders? But demographically, as Brian showed you, strong growth, that boomer population, together with millennials, we call it the barbell effect, that will continue to drive the rental housing market. We'd still have continued strong demographics in that sector, at least in the next 5-10 years, to drive rental housing market. Senior housing market, as you've seen, New Ulm had about 12% vacancy rate in assisted living, and actually that's better than national averages right now. I mean, US wide, we're like 80%. Senior housing got smoked by the pandemic, and it's continuing to recover. And we're seeing improvements each and every quarter, but it's a long-term recovery as vacancy rates are still not back to pre-pandemic levels. We're hoping that we can make I guess the goal would be a 1% increase per quarter in vacancy and occupancy rates. So it still is going to take some time to correct to get back to where we need to be. But long term, we see senior housing as a very bullish industry, especially because of demographics. But short term, it has its hiccups, and it has some time to recover as we come out of the pandemic. So with that, excuse me. Got this. With that, I just want to kind of open up the Q&A, take any questions you have, and field any questions, comments that you have regarding the housing market, a report, and field any questions you have. So we'll kind of turn it back to your side, and Brian and I will be available to take any questions you have and see what we have. So turn it back over here.
I have a question if we get things started.
I'm assuming you guys do a lot of housing studies for a lot of communities. Could you characterize the New Ulm study with like a group of peers? And are there things that would be considered pretty typical for a community in our peer group right now? And are there any things that maybe stand out a little bit for the New Ulm community compared to our peers?
I'll take this one here. Yeah, we sort of do a lot of these across the state, across the Midwest. You know, I liken you to you know, your city size. And recently we did Owatonna, we're doing Hutchinson right now again. Worthington, we're working at Worthington, right? Did that one a few years back too. You know, other towns that say 10, 15,000, give or take. I guess the one thing that really hit me first was your for sale market, the lot supply. I would say in most communities we're working today, there are very, very few vacant lots for development. And New Ulm is sitting pretty good as far as available lots for, you know, versus single versus multi. You had sites available for development. So that's a big first step, right? Because a lot of communities don't have, you know, any vacant land or zone land for that matter. So that's a big plus. You know, overall for rental, I do feel that for a community of your size, you really lack a lot of rental housing. I mean, usually communities of your size, there may be 30 plus rental communities in a town, you know, of New Ulm size, and we didn't have that. So I think you have a lot fewer rental options than a lot of communities that you have, and especially new construction options. We are starting to see more and more, I call it greater Minnesota communities that are doing new rental. But you do have a lot in the pipeline. So, you know, knock on wood, hopefully a lot of that product type that we inventoried will get built. Because there's quite a few projects out there that are, you know, planning or going through the phases. We just don't know yet, you know, are they gonna pull the trigger officially? So hopefully we'll see those get built, but you really, really need more rental housing stock. It's just very, very, very deficient. Now I'd say the senior housing market, you certainly lack independent products. Most communities do have some independent product, you know, light services like one meal a day or weekly housekeeping. You know, maybe it's a la carte type service base too, but you're really lacking in the independent senior housing as well as active adults. And that's where really the demand is today. As you showed out, you had 12% vacancy in assisted living, but it's that active product of where the demographics are today. And the reality is most seniors don't need services for 10 more years. So we're kind of in this no man's land where we have a lot of seniors, but they don't need the services yet, but they maybe want, you know, just one level living or the ability to get a continental breakfast or something like that. So real light services. So those are just kind of three, you know, high level things that I just noticed compared to other, you know, cities of your size. So we work across the state of Minnesota.
Can I follow up on that?
Yep, certainly.
When it comes to the independent living, the other communities that have been able to get that type of housing in their community, has that been strictly driven by the private sector, or has it been driven public, or is it a combination? I guess I'm looking for like, what would or could theoretically the EDA do to help facilitate, say, if we chose that as a main target area? What would
That's great.
something like that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, a lot of times, I would say the majority of senior housing today is private sector driven versus nonprofit driven. It's about 80-20 mix right now. We're 80% private versus 20% nonprofit driven. However, in a lot of communities, you may have the local hospital be a driver, right? A local healthcare provider, someone who's already in the marketplace that's going to expand their existing campus or something of that nature. So a lot of times we see a healthcare campus, you know, next to the hospital that has is affiliated, right? So they have the brand and the marketing, and they can, you know, be the healthcare center, so to speak, for the community. So you see a lot of that happening, where that helps stimulate development in that regard. But I would say right now you're just seeing a lot more private sector development for senior housing. 20 years ago, it was nonprofit driven, where you had a lot of churches and church affiliated senior housing providers really hit it hard. But they've kind of taken a back seat today to the private sector that's really it really dominates the new construction industry today. And I'd say the biggest challenge today for senior housing you have is going to be labor. By far, labor is the number one problem we have. And that's another reason to push for that independent living component, because it's less labor intensive versus the active versus assisted living memory care. That, you know, you need RNs, LPNs, 24/7 care. Whereas if you can do that independent product type, your staffing needs are decreased substantially, and you can better well manage those properties like more like a typical apartment complex with, you know, some light services. So that's the biggest driver today for senior housing. Is going to be labor, and a lot of facilities are actually cutting off occupancy levels because they do not have the labor to staff these buildings. So they're purposely bringing down the capacities because they can't even, you know, find the bodies to care for the seniors. So that's something that every operator is really looking at hard today, is do you have the labor force to
Mr. President, we're hitting past 9 o'clock, and I think people here are wanting to go, and we shouldn't wrap it up.
Okay. Any other questions? I mean, that was a huge
A lot of information.
to digest, yes, so.
We know that we've been waiting for this for some time, so we appreciate all the information.
Okay. No one else has any questions then?
Do we need to accept the report, or?
I'll offer a motion to receive the 2022 Comprehensive Housing Needs Analysis.
I'll second.
First and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's carried. All right. Economic Development Activity Report.
All right, thank you, Matt and Brian.
All right, thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it. Take care.
I'll just give you a few highlights of activity for the month of October. New Ulm Partnership Report, the billboard campaign is moving forward. I have 2 sponsors as of today, and continue to work with some of the larger employers to see if they want to join us in the billboard campaign. And the new economic development website is underway, being developed. The child care team, the building that we're purchasing, staff has been working with the architect on the design, and I think we're finalizing that, and we'll be ready to move into the construction document phase.
Did we
soon?
close on the billing then?
Not yet. We were supposed to find out on that deed grant application by the end of October. Now I'm hearing we should hear this week, so that's what
Okay.
we're waiting on to be able to set
That
the
was my next
closing date.
question about the grant. So
Yeah.
still waiting on that too. Okay.
So keep your fingers crossed. And then the fundraising campaign has kicked off for the community fundraising. Flyers will go out in the utility bills this month. We already received a donation yesterday from that campaign, so they must have been on the first billing cycle and got a check in right away, so we were happy to see that.
Caterpillar or what are they?
Next level up from Caterpillar.
Okay, I don't remember.
I don't remember what it is. Kitten, maybe? Kitten level. No activity on the commercial property rehab loan program, no activity on the small business loan program. Small business grants, 2 grants were paid out during the month of October, and 2 new applications were received and placed on the waiting list. And then other than that, you can see the other activity, which I won't go through, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to offer a motion to accept the Economic Development Activity Report for October 22.
I'll second.
First and second, any other discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That carries. Item number 7, report from Newbrick. No one is here today. Do we have any other information provided? Okay, we'll just move along then, which leads us to our adjournment. We are adjourned.
Before we adjourn, just, we have the mayor and 3 of you leaving next month, right? Or their last meeting? Right, so I think I'd like to see an agenda item next month to utilize your experience and your dedication for the last 6 years on giving us advice as we move with 3 new people onto the board. Thoughts about where our goals for 2023 should be. And you all have great experience and involvement in our city, and I think we need to hear that. So I'd like to have an agenda item for that. Discussion about 2023 goals, and final thoughts from our
I
board
think
members.
We saw one of them today.
Yeah, yep. And then we should have more discussion about this.
No, and I'll wait till the microphones are turned off, I guess, but
Yeah.
I wish more of a summary, more of a discussion would have occurred today, but we can maybe save that for another time. Can we offer like work sessions too, just to sit down informally to go through that? I know the city council will do that from time to time. Would there be any interest in doing that between now and the end of the year?
We can do that. It would just be almost like a special meeting. I mean, we'd have to go through, see when everyone's available and do one,
Okay.
but yeah, we could do a
It has to
work.
be in a meeting format though?
Yeah.
It does, okay.
It's just not, broadcasted, but it does have to be.
Is there any interest
out
in
there.
doing that with the group relating to housing? I personally, I'd like to see us prioritize a little bit. There's a lot of information, and I think we're not going to be able to tackle it all at once, and I think we have to pick and choose. That's my own personal assessment. I haven't read the whole thing. I tried to stay awake and read some. I took it home last night, but I got through some of it.
I think it's worthwhile. I mean, this is really what we've been waiting for.
Yeah,
This is what the
absolutely.
public's been waiting for. What does the housing study say? This is information that's useful for developers, for people considering moving. And, I mean, it really is impactful for our community, and for us to just kind of sit and read through it. I think it is worth getting together to look at what our goals are, where we're at, where we're doing well, prioritize, and, have a plan.
It needs to get in front of the council at some point, so they're aware of what the end results are, maybe what our recommendations are.
That's what I was thinking.
But I think
is
it's our turn first.
put together an
paid
action
for it.
plan of our priorities. I think there's some things that I felt were positive, like the number of lots, because I'm thinking, are we going to need to go out and buy land again and go through another Milford experience? And I'm encouraged to say no, that we don't have to do that. The other thing I saw is virtually, there's what, 2 or 3 lots in the whole Milford subdivision that are still available. So it's finally, in essence, come to a conclusion, which I feel has been a good thing. Housing going up there, a lot of twin homes, and again, we're addressing what they've already identified as a need. Then what can we do for some of the next steps? So I think that's a great idea, and to talk about some of the things going forward next month. And
Yeah, I can schedule a work session following the December meeting if you all want to, that are able to plan to spend, be here longer that day.
okay,
And then that gives you a month to review the study prior to that work session.
great. Okay. Great discussion. Anything else? Shall we adjourn? I think we are. Meeting is adjourned.
I will not be here. No. I know.